So I'm Kathy, and I'm here with my partner Jerry, and we own a company called Worldview Intelligence, and we're really focused on healthy workplace culture. And naturally, artificial intelligence is something that has caught our attention since it's being used by quite a number of workplaces and certainly by quite a number of people. And we were curious about what the impact on workplace culture is when people begin to adopt AI. So over the month of October, we had conversations with dozens of leaders across all sectors, private, public, and not-for-profit, asking them what their experience is with artificial intelligence. And that has formed the basis of this webinar today. And it's also formed the basis of a summary report that we've created called The Human Side of AI Adoption, a Collective Story of Readiness, Culture, and Leadership. And Tony mentioned already that this video is going to be sent out to people. We're also going to share that summary report with you as well. So I want to thank you for showing up to the webinar today. And I want to just say that the people that we talk to are generally optimistic about AI adoption and the use of artificial intelligence in their workplace, but they're also cautious. And we're going to talk about both of those elements throughout the webinar today. In just a moment, Jerry's going to set the stage for what we're going to be covering today, sort of do an introduction of the material. And then we are going to speak to the 3-point framework for a human-centered approach to AI adoption that emerged through the summary report. And we will also provide real-life examples that people shared with us of how they're using artificial intelligence. We will link it all to the 5 components of a healthy workplace culture. We'll let you know the ways that we support artificial intelligence adoption. And we're going to have a Q&A at the end. If people have questions, then you will feel free to use it or to ask them. I also wanted to say that we did use artificial intelligence ourselves. When we did the interviews, they were all summarized by AI, and then we took all of the summaries and put them into ChatGPT, and that generated both the 3-point framework that we're speaking to today and the summary report, a draft of it. And then we spent a good deal of time kind of going through it and editing it and making sure that, first of all, it was accurate, and second of all, it really reflected our voice. So with that being said, Jerry.
Great, thank you, Kathy. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. I'm just going to take a few minutes to build on the background Kathy suggested and emphasize a couple of key points about AI. But first, part of our motivation for doing the research behind the report was we kept seeing in newspapers and in various online articles this sort of hype about AI, and it seemed to focus principally on, I don't want to say the negative, but on what could be by some interpreted as a concerning picture. So we saw the CEO of one company, Anthropic, say that in the near future, all jobs would be eliminated. And we saw others say, 50% of the jobs would be eliminated. And then recently, in the past few weeks or more, we've seen the stories about large layoffs happening in companies like Amazon and Meta and Microsoft. And in the stories about the layoffs, they often said AI was one of the reasons. So as Kathy noted, we really wanted to find out what was happening on the ground. We wanted to not do a webinar that just regurgitated news stories, but we wanted to be real time, what's happening on the ground out there. And so we interviewed dozens of people, as Kathy said. And it was very clear from the broad range of people that we talked to that they're all pretty optimistic about the future of AI. Now, these are small, medium-sized enterprises or nonprofits or governmental units, but they're also very clear that they have to be really more strategic in their thinking about AI. And so that brought in for us, identified 3 things here that we consistently heard from people. One is that it's a very rapidly evolving field. but so it's adaptable, it's learning, and it's evolving. And we heard one CEO say, we operate under the perspective of how we're using our AI tools now may be very different in 6 months or 12 months as the tools themselves evolve. And so a lesson from some of that for people that are looking at AI is don't panic. You don't have to have it be the shiny new thing out there at the moment. You can bring it in, but recognize that there's going to be an evolution to it. It will continue to change. And so that's an important message for everyone out there, is it's still not settled. In fact, a number of people sort of talked about AI as we're in the messy middle of it, which we found kind of interesting, which is, as with many introductions and adaptions of new technologies, it doesn't move forward as rapidly as kind of our memory has a tendency for us to think it does. So from sort of the early Macintosh box that we used to have on our laptop to our phones literally being a walking computer or a smartphone, that took time. And in the early stages of desktops and adaptability, it was a bit messy. Or even think about your early cell phones that were more like a loaf of bread than these small things that we carry around now. And so this messy middle is going to go on for a while, and that lends to the storyline about the evolution and adaptability of AI, which also means that we have the opportunity as individuals and businesses and organizations to be very thoughtful and strategic about how we bring AI into our organizations. That we can be, the adaptability of it can be quite thoughtful. And then finally, one of the things that was really powerful for us was the notion of taking a change management approach to adaptability of AI, or bringing AI into your organization. And in particular, that means some good attention to the human element, to your employees and colleagues and customers. What does this mean at a human level for you? And particularly what makes this change management approach important is a recognition of human nature. So as human beings, we like stability and we like certainty. And so when something moves into a stage of uncertainty, when we're bringing something new into an organization, our default tendency as humans when we feel uncertainty is to see the worst case scenario. And so it becomes really important to pay attention to the change management kind of strategies, because another element when we have uncertainty is something that we call loss aversion. And so when we're confronted with change, we hold on to what we know 2 times more strongly than the possibility of what we might gain. And so part of change management is management of loss, while you're bringing forward the possibilities and the positivity of what artificial intelligence might mean for you, your company, your organization, employees, and customers. So thank you, and to you, Kathy.
Great. So the 3-point framework is on the screen right now. And I want to start by saying, we heard over and over again, don't create a solution in search of a problem. So there are already lots of problems and opportunities that exist. So when people are thinking about the AI that they want to use, that was really the first point. We're not doing it just to do it, but we want to have a purpose for it. And also, people either identified themselves as a first adopter or a fast adopter, or they described themselves as a fast and deliberate follower. So they wanted to see what other people were doing first, especially in their industry or their sector, before they jumped on the AI into AI use. And so the 3-point framework that emerged from all of the conversations that we had, the first one is foundational readiness and pilot projects, so that we start small and track what the results are. The second is cultivating an AI-ready culture, and that really goes back again to the people element or the human element of how we're bringing AI in. And the third one is strategic deployment and governance. And so I'm going to speak to foundational readiness here for a couple of minutes. Jerry's going to pop up the next slide. All right. So under foundational readiness, we there were 3 different categories identified. One is defining the purpose, the second is organizing the data, and the third is the launch of pilot projects. So if we start with defining the purpose, it's really important for leaders to be communicating what the purpose is of the AI that they're bringing in. And it's also really important to have that line up with business strategy or goals so that people can see the clear connection between the work that they're doing and the reasons why AI is being brought in. And one of the starting places here is to identify what the pain points are that exist in the organization. And this includes things like, what are the repetitive tasks that people do? How can people's inboxes be prioritized so that they're tackling the most important things first? Could be around scheduling and having AI improve scheduling. And the biggest question behind all of these things is, where can you free up time or make workflow easier? Then the second thing around organizing data, one of the issues that a lot of organizations have is that their data is not connected, it's not organized, and it's not clean. And so when we think about what we're putting into the AI, it's garbage in, garbage out, basically, and your outputs are only as good as your inputs. Now, we don't deal so much with the technical side of AI adoption. We do have colleagues at Theory Analytica who can bring a keen eye to that if that's an area where you would need support, or your IT department, if you have one, could definitely look at how your data is currently organized and whether or not it's connected. And once you've got that, then you can start to train your AI using the data that you have. And another thing that we heard over and over again is that organizations are using what they call bounded AI, so that they're developing it internal to their organization rather than using something publicly accessible like ChatGPT. So when we're thinking about organizing the data, there's also this question of learning how to prompt in AI so that you get good results, and instructing the AI as to the role that you want it to play. So you could ask it to be a data analyst, you could ask it to be an editor. There's any number of other requests that you could make for how you want the AI to function. And then the last point here is around launching pilot projects. And as you do that, or even before you do that, inviting people to play and experiment with AI is a really good starting point, so that they're not, they don't feel the pressure of needing necessarily to produce results. And I think Jerry's going to speak about that a little bit more. The other thing is to start with what you have. So many people said they have a Microsoft shop, so they're using Copilot and they're training people on how to use it, not making the assumptions that they'll automatically know how to use it, or that everybody will use it the same way. Or they're using Gemini or something else that's already available in the programs that they have. Look for productivity gains and focus there. So I mentioned a couple already, but some other examples are things like automate routine emails or routine communication, enhance search capabilities. So a couple of people noted that if you're going to Google and you're Googling for certain information, you'll have to go through a lot of tabs to find a more complete picture. Whereas if you use one of the chat bots, it will source that information and pull it all together for you. And if you're doing that, you'll also want to ask it to reference the information and then go back and check the references. Data processing at scale, so employee surveys or public engagement surveys. And then finally, the last example here is regulatory or jurisdictional research. A number of organizations mentioned that they've got like oodles and oodles of regulations to go through, and the AI can pinpoint what page to find it on and do a specific reference that normally will take a human being days to be able to pinpoint that information. So that's just a few of, that's basically the foundational readiness portion of this 3-point framework.
Thank you, Kathy. So we want to just build on the second point there about cultivating an AI-ready culture. And you can see that there are really 4 components here relative to the leadership, training, communication, and augmentation of human capacities. But one of the things that came through here very strongly, whether it was from people that we spoke with in the interviews or just the general, again, perception about change management, is that at its core, communicate, communicate, communicate. It's like we often might feel that we're talking a lot and communicating a lot, and about the time we're at that point is when people are really starting to hear us. And recognize that communication can take many forms, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. But I want to just note that no news does not equal no news. And our human tendency, again, is that when we have blank spots in information or places where information is not clear, we have a tendency to fill in those spaces with what's familiar to us. And so if there's no news, we're going to fill that space in with something that's familiar to us. We'll do that as individuals, and eventually we can do that as groups. So then you run the risk of having a group story emerging that's not an accurate story about the process of bringing AI into your company or organization. So it becomes really important to communicate as much as you possibly can. Importantly, this begins, as many of you would recognize, with the senior leadership team, that good communication from the leaders in your organization will set the tone, will model behaviors, and it will be that information that you provide as leaders that employees will adopt and use when they communicate with each other and communicate with customers or elsewhere. So one form of communication is just to model behavior, to that this is what we're doing as an organization, and I'm a part of what we're doing as a leader in this organization. A second thing that's really important is what we like to call safety or psychological safety, which gets us to sort of this notion of training and upskilling, which is create an environment where it's safe to fail forward. And because if that safety isn't there, there's the possibility of what we like to refer to as a shadow adoption, where employees start to use AI and adopt AI, but they don't communicate throughout the organization that they're doing it. In fact, there's some data out there that says in companies that have AI tools available, 87% of the employees are using it, but over 50% are not telling anyone what they're doing with the tools that they're using. So, and that's because they're not sure about the safety of what they're doing, about their ability to experiment. And in fact, I might remind you that if your experiences might have been the same as mine in the early use of various softwares, I was overly cautious in the use of them for fear that, you know, I would create a document and then it would disappear and I'd never find it again. In fact, that did happen once in a while. But when we bring in something new, we've now gotten more skilled at and aware that, you know, we won't lose all of our data, we won't lose everything we use, but there's still this bit of a fear of failure that exists out there in AI adoption, and that needs to be attended to in an AI-ready culture. Is the safety of adoption, safety of exploration, the safety of innovation, which really means that the psychology of that is curiosity replaces fear. And when curiosity replaces fear, it creates a place of almost like a sandbox as a metaphor. We can go in, we can play around, we can experiment. And the benefits of that is that we might learn how to use our tools that we've adopted even more effectively, or we might discover new tools that can really benefit our organization. So we heard from a number of different companies that create time for employees to actually experiment individually or as teams and bring in new ideas and new things that might be a new piece of an AI tool that they hadn't experienced before that now enhances the productivity of the company or the customer service or elsewhere. And then lastly, a part of it is just on the part of leadership and a message to communicate is we're really here hoping to enhance or augment what our employees and our coworkers can deliver and do. That this is not a replacement culture. We actually want to be better as a company. And we've found that this kind of approach, many of the smaller and medium-sized organizations were actually adding employees because of AI, and not in an elimination of employee mode, but it creates a growth mode for companies and organizations. So
yeah, and I think that's a really good point, as you mentioned earlier about we hear about all of these layoffs that are coming as a result of AI, and yet most of those layoffs are happening in really big companies. And I think probably to a person, all the people I talk to in the small and medium-sized organizations, they all talked about the importance of augmenting human capabilities and not replacing human beings, and that there's always going to be a role for human oversight. All right, so the last of the 3-point structure here is, or the 3-point framework, is strategic deployment and governance. And that covers quite a range of things. As you see, we've got 5 points here, the last 2 of which we're going to address separately. So I'm going to start here with the AI Center of Support. And a number of people recommended that there be some kind of central resource for artificial intelligence, where there would be people who would help guide AI experimentation, would promote the shared learning. So that I think this is a really important element for a lot of the companies that are using AI, is that they're sharing their learning, which means that the learning is accelerated because they're learning with and from each other. And Jerry and I have seen this just for ourselves as we've learned, as we've done various things with artificial intelligence, shared that with each other, or as we've learned with other colleagues that we've been doing work with. Also, a center of AI, or an AI center of support, would be able to answer questions related to appropriate AI use, and people would be able to report issues or challenges or inconsistencies that they're experiencing with AI use. It would also be the place where some of the rest of these would live, the adaptable policies and measuring impact and things like that. So this AI Center of Support doesn't necessarily need to be the technical center, but it could be as well. So then the adaptable AI policies, Jerry mentioned this already as well, that the field is evolving so rapidly that what we know now could be completely different in 6 months' time. And what we know now is completely different than it was 6 months ago. And I think any of us who've been experimenting with artificial intelligence has seen the evolution of it and the evolution of its capabilities, along with certainly for us, we're doing better prompting, and we're thinking more about what is the role that we want the AI to assume when we are doing our prompting. So when we talk about adaptable AI policies, it's really like your policies are a living document. Update it and audit it on a regular basis to make sure that they're in keeping with what's happening with AI. With some organizations or some sectors, there's a regulatory component because they might be subject to different regulations, and they want to be sure that they're abiding by those regulations as well as their own internal guidelines. Within the policies, you want to include things like guardrails, instructions on AI roles, give examples of prompts, acceptable use. In many of the organizations that we talked to, they talked about asking employees to focus on professional use and not on personal use of AI. And then there may be other things like ensuring that their acceptable use, that it's ethical, legal, and really abides by whatever values the organization also has. AI policies could look at what are the human roles and human responsibilities, could talk about education and training on AI and on policies. Would also cover enforcement of the rules or the principles that people are using and what consequences would happen as a result of not using the AI properly. Also want to look at data privacy, security, and compliance, and principles of fairness. A lot of the people that we talked to did talk about the fact that bias does show up in artificial intelligence, and so they take steps to try to reduce the amount of bias that shows up. And in addition to bias, now I forgot what I was going to say. So I'll just move on to the next thing. Metrics. We want to measure impact. If we say that AI is going to be time saving and is going to allow people to do higher value work, then you want to be able to show that that is the case. So you want to measure how much time is being saved, what the higher value work is that people are able to do. If there's greater proficiency in things like scheduling, those are some of the things that you want to pay attention to in measuring impact. And so we're going to talk about operational efficiency and strategic innovation next. And I do see a question in here around, do we have any examples of workplace policies that we can share? And yeah, or would they be too unique for each workplace that you have to build one for our agency? So our colleagues at Theory Analytica are actually starting to draft a template for workplace policies that might be useful, and we can check in with them and see where they're at with that and see whether or not that's something that we would be able to share fairly soon.
We do have a little bit of information on policies out there that we can share now, but a working template that would be useful we should have in the fairly near future, because some of it is really unique to whether you're a law firm, how risk averse you are as a firm or an organization. Where's the role of privacy, and so how's your relationship with your customers? Where do you land in the regulatory environment? Those are all factors to consider in policies, and we're happy to talk a little bit more in a bit. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about operational efficiency, because certainly AI can bring many different efficiencies to organizations, whether it's in customer service, whether it's in medical diagnosis, whether it's in robotics and manufacturing. There's a broad range of efficiencies. Kathy mentioned research earlier on regulatory policies that AI can bring. The important thing really here is that you be strategic about what you're seeking from the AI tools that you're bringing into your business or organization. What's the pain point or the problem that you would really like to attend to? How can you be strategic to find out what's the best tool for you? The question really is, how will this help our organization? What difference might it make for our customers and clients? And the answer to that question can help you begin to both identify the best tool to use and how to be strategic in analyzing it. An important element here, though, again, as we've emphasized all along, is don't lose the human connection when you're thinking about bringing in various AI tools. We spoke to one sort of mid-level executive in an organization that found that the approach that the senior level was taking was turning people into a cog in the wheel, and the organization was losing its identity. And this person actually eventually left the organization because it had lost its human connection, and employee dissatisfaction actually was going up. This piece that Kathy just mentioned too, also about data, is something to really be attended to, this garbage in, garbage out. So you really want to have consistency of quality data, and you want to have consistency of data across all of the various departments. We know from experience that departments have different languages. Sometimes they communicate well, sometimes engineering doesn't communicate well with marketing, or marketing with finance. And so building that level of consistency across the organization is important. And whatever you want to do in terms of content, it still requires a good human review. As Kathy mentioned, there are biases in content that show up. Remember, large language models are working on historical data, and some of that historical data has biases built into it, whether it's in hiring patterns or customer analysis or so on. So context needs review. And then finally, one of the things that many of the companies spoke to, or people that we spoke to, said, stay true to your ethics. So again, what are the ethics of your company? Recognize them and give careful consideration to how the AI tool can be used to fit within your company's ethics.
Great, thanks. I'm going to speak about how artificial intelligence is driving strategic innovation in some of the companies that we talk to. I think a lot of times when we think about artificial intelligence, most of us think about chatbots, and yet AI goes so far beyond that, it's very comprehensive. So Jerry referenced healthcare there a minute ago. And when we think about precision and accuracy, some of the things that we heard are things like it can detect illnesses earlier, or it can, with skin cancer surgeries, the accuracy rate of getting all of the cancer in the surgery has gone up pretty dramatically to like somewhere in the 90% range. And this is true for other surgeries as well. The robotics can hone in, like hip replacement surgeries are now largely done robotically, and it's so much more precise and accurate. When we talk about predictive capabilities, mentioned already about health diagnosis, there's a lot of AI that's being trained by physicians on how to do a diagnosis. There was one person that I spoke to who is very big in the healthcare field, where they will input plain language into an AI, have that convert it into the behind the scenes data stuff that I don't know how much about. And then they test the results with physicians to ask if that corresponds with their experiences. And if it doesn't correspond with their experiences, they go back to what they input into the AI and improve the languaging of it, which then improves the algorithms in producing the results. So it's really quite remarkable, the work that's being done in healthcare around diagnosis and surgeries. Also, you don't want to just rely on AI to do a diagnosis for you. That's where the physician and oversight, human oversight, comes back in. Also, thinking about predictive capabilities, there are tools out there right now that people are using to help predict potential supply chain issues so that they can address them preemptively. If we're talking about improved public service, one of the leaders that I spoke to in a government agency here in Nova Scotia talked about how they're using artificial intelligence to improve 311 efficiency. 311 is an informational number that you can call. And he described that there are basically 3 tiers of questions or queries that show up on those 311 calls. And the most common questions are ones that can be answered by existing material. And it could be things like, what's the garbage pickup schedule? Other things like that that are very routine. People will have 24-hour access to that kind of information, and it can be answered just using AI. The second tier is around people providing background information. So you need to know you're calling because you want to have more information about what's happening with road construction or transportation improvements, and a person can provide some background information on that. And then the third tier, which is really the most the highest human value piece is for people who are requiring problem solving. And there's all kinds of ways that they are now using AI to start looking at what's happening in neighborhoods, so they can think about what is the kind of police presence that might be needed in a neighborhood, or what are the kinds of issues that are showing up on a regular basis. That then helps them be more strategic about how they deploy resources to different neighborhoods. And then with competitive intelligence, this is an opportunity to automate high value strategic tasks. And that could be something like screening acquisition targets for a company, or conducting financial research, or doing a competitive analysis. So those are a few examples of strategic innovation. There are more that you would see in the summary report that we're going to be sending out to you when we send out the video.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Before we move on, I just want to tell a little bit of a personal story. Just this week, a couple of days ago, I had my annual eye exam, and prior to going in, I asked ChatGPT, why are we still doing the 1-2 forms of exams? It said it's accurate, but then I asked, well, where's the future of eye exams? And one of the things that came up was that apps are being developed to be on our phones, our smartphones, that we can use to do sort of a preliminary eye exam analysis. And in the conversation with my ophthalmologist, one of the things that really emerged was how this democratizes access to eye care. So if you are in a developing country where there are very few ophthalmologists or eye care physicians, but you might have access to a cell phone, you can begin to at least detect what's happening with your eyes and where you might need eye care. Or here in the US or in Canada, if you live in a very rural area and you're hours away from eye care, these devices, your cell phone could be an advantage. So the uses that are showing up are quite incredible, the innovation that's showing up, and the democratization of services that's showing up, which I think is an important thing for us to give some consideration to. So as we near the end of our presentation here, one of the things we want to mention importantly is it all starts with workplace culture. If you have a healthy workplace culture, AI integration is going to go much more smoothly. And if you don't have a healthy workplace culture, you're ripe for problems. So think about AI as integrating it into the larger picture of your organization, your company. What's the culture? How does it sustain and support being healthy? And we've identified 5 key components of a healthy workplace culture that all are foundational for AI integration in a smooth and effective way. And first, as we've mentioned earlier, is leadership. That we can't emphasize enough what we've heard from the people we interviewed and our experience in general working with clients around a healthy workplace culture is the role of leadership in your organization and the importance to model behaviors, that how leaders behave affects how employees and colleagues behave. And then again, this issue of psychological safety and belonging. If I feel safe to experiment, that leads to opportunities for innovation and creativity and advancing the company's organization's use of AI and the benefits from bringing it in. And then again, communicate. We can't communicate enough. Recognize how human behavior responds to lack of communication, and how human behavior responds to being invited into changing things that they've known a long time and have to do differently. And employee engagement. Kathy had mentioned opportunities to create forums and discussion groups and so on. That builds support for the initiative and builds trust in leadership that what we're doing is going to be good for us as employees and good for our company and good for the people that we serve. And then finally, just the importance again of metrics that Kathy mentioned earlier. Metrics help us know what's working and what might not be working that we need to attend to. And then we can enhance, as if you take an appreciative approach, we can enhance what's working, bring more of that into the organization, and metrics help us identify what that all is. So back to the start, it all begins with a healthy workplace culture, and it makes this whole process go much more smoothly and much more effectively.
Yeah, and I would say that of all the people that we talked to, they all had some pretty strong foundation in a healthy workplace culture. And I think that's one of the reasons that they're using AI the way that they are, and also why they were willing to speak with us. We have a question, Jerry, from Ryan Deschamps. Actually, hi, Ryan. In the hype of social media, LLMs, supervised learning, decision systems, and RL are lumped into the same pile. What advice do you have to help organizations distinguish among the different types of AI and what they imply? Said LLMs are easy to use, but they do not really have predictive power or reasoning capability. Reinforcement is better at prediction and automation, but requires a significant level of data collection, maintenance, and development. So what advice do you have to help organizations distinguish among the different AI? Do you want to tackle that one, Jerry?
Well, so as we said earlier, the first and key thing is to decide, what do you want to accomplish strategically by bringing an AI tool in? Is it you want to enhance research? And now many of the LLMs are really just search engines, and they've gotten quite good, but you also want to be careful that sort of research and verify. But if that's a primary need is to speed up and enhance research capacities, that might what you need. There are also AI assistants or personas, and those personas can be in the form of a chat bot. And so you want to you have first level customer service where you might have an individual now providing customer service, and they're answering the same 50 questions over and over again. You could use a persona to answer those questions, and then the individual in your company can move to level 3 and level 4 services. And so identifying what's your goal here and that. If you want to get into larger platforms, that's more intense and requires higher level of skills. But you may, as Kathy mentioned earlier, some organizations really want to be bounded in not only just research, but how they might use the material that they have. So drafting a legal document, for instance, might require you to be very clear about the information that's accessed because you're pretty risk averse, and you don't need necessarily a persona to do that. You might want to use an LMN for some research, but you also are dealing perhaps with client confidentiality, and so it requires some clear sets and policies. So AI is not a single thing. It's and the amount of tools is growing very rapidly. We spoke to the CEO of a company that's using a new software that drafts emails called Shortwave, and that software is really helpful in drafting emails for challenging and difficult situations. In fact, better than what she felt she could draft. And so the first question is what do we want to accomplish? And then what's the tool we use to want to accomplish that? So do you have anything to add there, Kathy?
I think just reinforce, do your research. Make sure that whatever you're using is going to suit the purpose that you have identified you want to address.
And just to note, some of the LMMs are better at one thing than the other thing. So they're not identical. ChatGPT is, so a lot of people like to use Claude for one form of research, and then some people like to use Perplexity for another. And Perplexity has gotten really good at referencing, giving the references for the information that came from. Some people like Gemini, particularly. Apparently, Gemini is really good for travel planning research, and so they're not singularly all the same. Some of them have different strengths and unique characteristics.
Great. Yeah, and even when you get references, it's really important to source them and go back and check them, because the AI can make it look like it's a real reference. And I've had people say they searched and searched and searched for the reference and couldn't find it. So that's why we still need humans in the mix. One of the reasons. Okay, you can move to the next slide there, Jerry. All right, I just want to spend a quick moment talking about the ways that we support the human side of AI adoption. And this is, we've provided today a sort of a broad overview, but we're happy to chat with anybody about their specific situation and offer some thoughts about steps forward. That would be this free 30-minute consultation with either Jerry or I, or possibly both of us. And we'll have contact information in the information that we send out to you. We also are offering a 2-hour leadership alignment call. One of the CEOs that I'm working with, his leadership team is not all on the same page with respect to AI adoption, and they all recognize that there is a need to be proactive about it. So we're going to do a call with them to help them get on the same page and decide what their next steps are. We also have a 6-part online series, 3-hour sessions every other week for 6 sessions, so we can introduce the idea of a healthy workplace culture and AI adoption. And in between sessions, people have that opportunity to begin the implementation. And we work with people throughout the whole month-and-a-half period, or whatever that is. And here it mentions a 1-day facilitated program where we would help a team or an organization, again, lay a foundation for what they want to do next and identify next steps, providing education along the way about AI adoption, policies, change management, worldviews, worldview intelligence. We also have a 2-day program, and we have longer periods of time that we can work with clients, and all of that information is available at worldviewprograms.com.
So now we're at Q&A, and welcome any questions folks might have.
And if there aren't any questions, we are going to send, it'll be probably mid next week, we'll send out the video, and we will send out the summary report, and just got a thank you here in the chat box, the question box, so you're very welcome. It occurs to me also this question about AI policy and adoption. A couple of months ago, we did a session with our colleagues at Theory Analytica, and we developed a document on AI adoption after that session, and we'll include that in the information that we send out to you. All right, then, not seeing any other questions. Is there any last thing that you want to add, Jerry, about what we learned from all of these great conversations that we had?
Thank you, Kathy. I would just emphasize again that all these stories about AI is going to eliminate jobs, and AI is let's all be worried about it. That's not what we picked up. We picked up from the dozens of people we talked to across about every imaginable sector you can in the US and Canada, a very optimistic perspective, and the difference it can make in smaller and medium-sized organizations and nonprofits and government departments. So yes, we need to be concerned about some elements of it, and we need to be strategic about it, but the optimism that we heard and picked up just reinforced my belief in the potential of where this technology can go.
Yeah, I found myself becoming more excited with each call, just in terms of how people were using it, the range of businesses that people were from, the eagerness that people wanted to share with us about their experiences, and it really makes me more optimistic for what the future is going to look like, even if we don't know what it's going to be like in 6 months from now. So, well, I think that's it then. Excellent. We have Leslie Southwick Trask. Hello there. Thanks for the overview. High-end user, obviously. We talked to a number of consultants who are very AI forward, working with AI in their clients. So
I would add one of the people we spoke with does a lot of work in developing countries, and I asked the question about, are they going to be disadvantaged? And the answer was almost everybody or in developing countries has access to a cell phone and AI, so then they can access AI. His concern was energy availability to power cell phones and other energy needing tools to access AI. But I think it really is, like I mentioned earlier, a democratization. It can make a real difference in rural areas. Thank you for the question and for the comment.
yeah, and I would also note that we did have a number of people talk about the environmental consequences of the use of AI at the moment, and that is definitely going to be an issue that's not going to go away in the near future.
Right.
And then Ryan offered that he was once in a session where it was obvious that a consultant used AI to explain generic things like fiduciary responsibility. It was okay, but it did make me reduce my trust in the team. And there's a growing cringe element to LLMs that we should be aware of. And I think that reminds me of a couple of things. One is people are saying that entry-level jobs are going to go away. And in a lot of the conversations that we had, people went, they're not going away, but they're changing. The nature of them will change. And for some of those jobs, they will be higher value. But there is that question of what's that going to look like in the future, entry-level jobs. And the other thing that comes up regularly is, what about our ability to think critically when we're using AI or relying on AI? And I think that that conversation as well, people were saying that the nature of how we think critically may change, but we definitely need to ensure that we have critical eyes on all of the AI that we're using and that we're sending out there. All right, thanks everyone for attending our webinar. If you have feedback or other questions, we're always happy to get them, and we'll see you soon.
Go to worldviewprograms.com to learn more about our healthy workplace culture program options.